Hi, and welcome to the first of the series of APC webinars called Print Innovations. And I'm your host, Jim Sewell of Hatteras Press. Thank you for joining us. Unfortunately, during our live session, our recording did not start off for the introduction, and we began, as you'll see, a little bit into the wonderful presentation by International Paper. Our sincere apologies for that. I did, however, want to add this video to the beginning of our session to make sure you're aware that this is a series of webinars using the Zoom webinar format. Our title sponsor is Lindemeyer Monroe, a local distributor and a long-term supporter of the Advertising Production Club, and we thank them very much for their generosity in supporting our club over the years. This series will continue approximately a couple of webinars a month through the fall. And we will include the session itself. We'll have presenters from several of the important North American mills in both coated and uncoated paper. And registering early for these webinars through the APC-NYC.org website or through one of our vendor social media links allows you to request a sample kit in advance of the webinar. For example, tonight on the webinar, there were over 30 of the more than 100 people who had registered, did so early enough that they were able to have samples on hand and look at the things that, that were shown during the webinar. Also would like to thank our board led by President Siobhan Dawkes and Treasurer Eloise Martinez and Vice President Linda Monteleone, and our chairperson and past president, immediate past president is Judy Salmon. And our Print Innovations Committee consists of myself and Mark Armato, Judy Salmon, and Deborah Korn, and we thank them for their work in bringing this series. This was originally going to be a live in-person event on Earth Day, April 22nd, and because of COVID, we had to cancel that. Luckily, we did not have any penalties from the venue that we had scheduled with or our caterers, so we were able to preserve funds for our scholarship funds, which is an important goal of our club, is to make the best use of the donations that we raise to go directly to student scholarships, and very, very little of our fundraising goes into overhead for the club itself. We're an all-volunteer organization, and we now are using a little bit of our scholarship fundraising to pay some interns to help us out with things like this summer. And I'd like to thank one of those, Sophia Stancina, for helping us out with some of the promotion on this webinar. So, without further ado, but unfortunately without the real introduction of each of the people, I would like to introduce the presentation by Jay Wedin, Karin and Wayne Majuri of International Paper. Thanks so much, and please, like they say, like and subscribe on YouTube, and watch the rest of the series, and join us live for the next webinars coming up in August, September, and October of 2020. Thank you.
You can see this graphic called the IP Way Forward. These are our core values to help keep us aligned towards that goal. You can see the outer edges of the circle where we have investing in people, improving our planet, innovative products, and inspired performance. These are all core values, but you can see they're centered around the core of sustaining forests. So why am I sharing this? Well, all of this really speaks to the culture of our company, and I wanted to give you a feel for that. You can see how sustainability really is at the center of our values, and that we conduct ourselves and our business at the highest and most ethical levels to support that. Karin mentioned at the beginning here, when you look at the three of us, Wayne and I have, what, 28 years with the company. Karin, she has 25 years. That says a lot in itself. We really love working for the company, and we are really proud of the products we make, and also in the way we conduct ourselves, both internally within our organization and externally with our customers. It really is a great place to work. In today's world, it's more important than ever for customers to align with companies that are committed to core values that are similar to their own. I think customers want to have confidence in the companies that they are partnering with. And IP's commitment to those values I've talked about has been acknowledged by some third-party recognitions, and I'd like to share some of those here with you. So you can see the Fortune magazine's most admired companies for the last 17 years, Ethisphere's most ethical companies for the past 14 years straight, 2020 Women's Choice Award for best companies to work for diversity and millennials, And we are a member of the FTSC for Good Index Series for demonstrating strong environmental, social, and governance practices. So for those of you out there that are familiar with IP, I know you recognize what I'm talking about here. And for those of you who aren't familiar, I hope this gives you just a little flavor as to who we are as a company. So International Paper has been around since 1898, and we are well positioned to be around for a long, long time to come. We are a forest products company. That's all we do. Simply put, we make three things that we sell: uncoated paper, packaging, and fluff pulp. Now, fluff pulp is that absorbent stuff that goes into things like diapers. So we are unique in this diversity of product, and we are uniquely capable of surviving a market like the one we are in now because of the diversity. And we know that COVID-19 has dramatically impacted printing. But while that side of the business has been off, the packaging side has been strong. Think of all the online purchasing, for example, that comes in boxes. And consumer products that need absorbent pulp, they are always in demand. So these other sectors have helped us weather the storm on the paper side, and we will be a survivor after all this is said and done. So you can see here in this slide that we have some ambitious goals that we have outlined for ourselves for this decade. That vision is to build a better future for people, our planet, as well as the company. They include things like leading the forest stewardship efforts globally, improving our impact on the environment, and promoting the well-being of our employees and the people of the communities in which we live and work. We are one of the world's leading producers of renewable fiber-based packaging, pulp, and paper, with sales over $22 billion last year. So we are a big company, there's no question about it. We operate globally, and I hope this slide gives you an idea of the scope of our business. We are also the world's largest producer of uncoated printing papers. And our operations here in the United States on the paper side include 4 mills. But today we're going to focus in on one specific one. We may be one of the largest paper companies in the world, but we're also your local paper company as well. We have a mill right here in New York State, in Ticonderoga, New York, which is upstate, right between Lake George and Lake Champlain. And it's actually located within the Adirondack State Park, as Karin had mentioned. And for the last 2 years, we've had the pleasure of hosting the APC annual mill trip at Ticonderoga. And we were hoping that we were going to get it in again this year. Looking a little, unsure at this point, unfortunately. Hopefully, we'll be able to do that again in the very near future. So, to bring you on a little journey upstate, I'm now going to call my friend and colleague, Wayne Majori, to take you there. So, Wayne, take it away.
All right, thank you, Jay. As Jay and Karin had mentioned, the Ticonderoga Mill is really kind of a special mill, particularly in relation to the rest of our fleet of mills. I really enjoyed my time that I had up at Ticonderoga. As he mentioned, it's very unique in that it's an integrated paper mill that's located within a state park. You really don't see that anywhere else. The mill was built back in 1970. It's the second mill that was placed in Ticonderoga. It replaced the original mill that was built back around 1925. But back in the 60s, the company looked at the opportunity to say, hey, we can have a bigger manufacturing efficiency and a better footprint if we can relocate those operations to another part of the town, which they did. And it's been quite a success. It's really a special place, as Jay mentioned, where it's being located in the park next to some beautiful water bodies near the edge of Lake George, as well as on the shores of Lake Champlain. It enjoys an exemplary safety and environmental stewardship record. And it's really been an important contributor to the local economy. It produces about 900 tons per day of finished product on 2 different paper machines with 5 sheeters on site. They're really focusing on what they can do to remain globally competitive going forward. And recently, we've been looking at how we can continue to improve our machine efficiencies on site, as well as to focus on how we can reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Recently, we implemented a project to displace what originally was powering the mill with a lot of number 6 fuel oil and have replaced that with compressed natural gas. So it's been an important contribution to the mill for the efficiency and also reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. We employ about 620 employees on site, and the facility in general actually supports another several hundred people in terms of the folks that help us with the other supplies we need at the mill and performing maintenance and equipment replacement and so on. It is the largest employer in the county, and it provides an important financial support to a lot of the local organizations, including the school and the hospital and other civic organizations. They're committed to community partnerships, working with the Governor of New York's office, the Community Advisory Council, which is a small group of residents that live on both sides of Lake Champlain, who are interested in how the mill operates and how the health of the overall economy is that International Paper contributes. We also work very closely with the New York Department of Environmental Conservation and also several regional economic development councils. The overall outlook for the company is very good with this mill. We have competitive assets on site for producing high quality paper. We have access to abundant resources that are also high quality in terms of the water and the wood fiber. And we also have a strong infrastructure in place for bringing in the raw materials, access to a very skilled workforce, and also rail and truck systems to bring the products to our customers. We also operate in a rather unique environment in that we operate in a very robust regulatory oversight. We work with the New York State DEC, we work with the Adirondack Park Agency, we work with the town of Ticonderoga, we work with the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources, and we also work with the federal EPA, and then also the Army Corps of Engineers for their jurisdiction over the Lake Champlain.
We do have a question. It says,
Sure.
What is an integrated mill and why is it good or better? And I mean, I can let you speak to that.
Sure. That's a great question. An integrated mill means essentially that the paper mill actually processes wood on site and converts it from a log form or a chip form into the cellulose to develop pulp. So what that really is an advantage for the Thai mill is that you can control your own supply of the raw material, and you can also control your own quality. So you don't necessarily rely on any other outside partners for a reliable source of supply. One of the really nice things about this part of the country is that there's a really stable source of high quality fiber. And by having that integrated capability on site, we can tap into the local supply that is managed on a sustainable basis to produce a consistent quality of fiber and in turn consistent quality of paper.
Thank you, Wayne.
Well, next I'd like to share a little bit of a story, particularly around what's near and dear to my heart, the forestry aspects for the Ticonderoga Mill. What I'd like to do is kind of walk us through each one of these images that's on the screen and kind of share with you a little bit of the story of what we do for sustainable forestry and how we provide sustainable fiber to the International Paper Ticonderoga Mill. I'll start at the far left where the map of New York State is. You can see where the Ticonderoga town is highlighted. You can see we're right on the border of Vermont, and we're actually pretty close to the Canadian border as well. As we mentioned before, the Ticonderoga Mill is actually located within the Adirondack Park, which is quite a resource, a unique resource as well in itself. It's about 6 million acres, and essentially about half of it is managed by private land ownerships, and the other half is essentially in public management through the state of New York. There is a variety of different regulatory guidelines that are in place within the park that steer people as to how they can manage their land, and that also includes how they manage their forests. We buy about 80% of the material for our mill directly out of the Adirondack Park from private landowners. We buy approximately 95% of our fiber actually comes from private land holdings rather than the state. The forest lands that are privately owned within the park are very well managed. A number of them have been harvested and managed since the 1920s. So there's really a robust history of people understanding the biological opportunities as well as the economics behind it, how to successfully manage timberlands up there. Just to give you a little bit of insight as to how that works, there's more than one type of product that comes off the land base. Essentially, there are high value products which can go into veneers such as like guitars or pianos. And then there's the building lumber that can go to making like hardwood flooring. And then there's the lower grade material, which is essentially has a little bit more defect that wouldn't be suitable quality for some of those high quality products that we use in turn for making paper products. So if you look at in general, the average acre that's out there of commercial timberland, you'll see that probably about 80% of the material that's out there tends to be having some sort of defect that would not necessarily make the quality for lumber or for a guitar or something like that. And that material is really the kind of material that we purchase. Where the pulp and paper industry plays a very important role, particularly the Ticonderoga Mill, is that we provide a market outlet for a lot of that low-grade material that enables the landowners to actually manage for their high quality and their higher profit margin materials that actually are harvested off the land. Without having the Ticonderoga Mill there would really be a lot of difficulty in people being able to perform the harvest they want to on their land to help pay for their taxes, how to gain revenue from their land, or help pay for perhaps their child's college education or medical bills or whatnot. The general acreage out there produces a lot of different products out there. And overall, the forest products industry is very well integrated in terms of on a generic acre that's managed for timber harvest, you'll see that the lower value material goes to the pulp and paper markets like Ticonderoga. The higher value materials will go to a sawmill. And what Ticonderoga also does is they'll buy some of the waste products that are generated from those sawmills in the form of paper chips that we in turn can take into our mill and also make paper from that as well. We also in turn buy some of the waste material from those other mills that we use to burn for heat and essentially generating energy at our mill. So it really has a true cycle of sustainable products all through there. Kind of transitioning a little bit to the photo in the middle, you can see an interesting group of characters there that were participating in one of our tours. This particular tour photo was taken on one of our partners called Lime Timber. They manage the lands that International Paper formerly owned, and they now manage the forest there under two sustainable forest programs. One is SFI and the other is FSC. This particular photo, we're standing in front of a program where they are essentially managing a variety of their land in a demonstration sense to test the idea of how can we improve the habitat for neotropical birds that migrate from Central America all the way up to Northern New York for their brooding and their breeding and raising their young. So what we had an opportunity to do was to share where Lime Timber and International Paper have been working together with other folks like the American Forest Foundation and Audubon to test the idea of how can we manage our land to provide multiple benefits from forest management. So not only from an economic standpoint, but also by enhancing wildlife habitat. And overall, it's been quite successful. Every year there are tests that go back, testing that takes place out there with some of the scientists to perform some monitoring to see what kind of wildlife is actually occupying these areas that recently been treated. And they've really been able to prove that through these treatments of little patch cuts, that we've been able to enhance the amount of neotropical birds that are using these sites versus the areas next to it that haven't necessarily been treated. So it's really come away for a really great sport. The next photo to the right are a couple of our tour members. I think enjoyed our mill tour. That's also what we're proud to do, is to show how we bring in the material and how we treat it at the mill and convert it into a usable pulp and eventually into the paper. Looking at the lower or the middle photo at the bottom, here's an example of where we were taking our folks for a tour out in the site to be able to see the various stages of forest management. Essentially, the hardwood forests that grow there naturally are managed on pretty much an 80-year cycle. So there's a lot of planning ahead of time as to saying, well, how am I going to perform these harvests? And in general, the harvests that take place up here are essentially selectively harvested, not clear cut. So each harvest is carefully planned out to identify what are the proper trees to be removed at the time. And what we've done through these tours is be able to share where these sites have been harvested recently, maybe in the past year or the past 5 years, past 10 or 20 and so on, to kind of see the progression, to see how the forest responds to various harvest treatments and how it will look at each stage of the game. The lower right-hand side is essentially a photo of an active harvesting operation and what we call the deck, where essentially the logging crews will bring the wood to the deck and perform the separation of the high-value products from the low-value products. These contractors play a very important role in the success of forest management, as well as with the International Paper Ticonderoga Mill. They're typically multi-generational companies that are essentially service contracting with the landowners, perform the timber harvesting, and then they deliver the correct products to the correct market outlets. We do business at the Ty Mill with approximately 150 different subcontracting companies. So it's a variety of folks. It's really a nice experience to see people really dedicated to doing a great job on the land. You know, some of these parcels that are being harvested now, they can tell you stories about how their fathers or how their uncles actually. So it's really a great story. Thank you.
There was a question in the chat room that I think you might be able to speak best to. It says, the question was, IP doesn't own the woodlands that it uses to manufacture paper, instead purchases from private landowners, which is the case. You want to talk a little bit about that and about the history of how that went?
Sure, sure. International Paper had a very long history of land ownership. When I first started my career, we had probably about 250,000 acres in northern New York, and we had it in a variety of different states. However, back in the year 2005, 2006, International Paper went through a transformation where we really wanted to evaluate what is the best structure for the company based on the outlook of our expertise and our asset base. And at that time, they decided that they would seek very concrete contractual agreements with potential buyers for the timberlands, to where we could unlock the value of the timberlands that we could reinvest back in other facets of International Paper, but in turn sell these timberlands that International Paper managed for decades to parties that were very interested in maintaining it in a ongoing forest management regime. And that's particularly the case with lime timber. I didn't mention it before, but the majority of these large industrial land ownerships up in northern New York tend to be managed on a long-term basis, whether it be for an investment or through a TMO or a REIT structure. And often these land bases have often sold the development rights through a conservation easement with the New York State. So that really, what that really is essentially it sells the opportunity for development rights to the state of New York. So the state of New York would actually own that. So as an owner, like in the case of lime or others, essentially that land is going to not be developed, but continue to be managed in a timber management regime going forward.
Great, thank you, Wayne. So, as Wayne said, our Ticonderoga Mill is a fully integrated mill. And again, that means we produce the pulp for the paper as well as the paper itself at the facility. So when you're producing high quality papers for printing, you need a blend of hardwoods and softwoods. And typically it's somewhere about 70% hardwoods, 30% softwoods. So softwood fiber comes from evergreen trees like pine trees, and they have long fibers that give paper strength. And hardwood fibers come from deciduous trees, those are the kind that lose their leaves in the fall. And those fibers are shorter and act as a binder and a filler, kind of, if you think about it, to the longer softwood fibers. And that combination creates a sheet of paper that is ideal for printing. So because of the proximity of an abundance of hardwoods, as Wayne mentioned, as well as the necessary balance of softwoods, we produce some of the finest papers in the industry up at our Ty Mill. And that includes our entire Axon Opaque line, and also our high-end products in our Hammermill brand. And also we have offset colors as well in our Spring Hill brand. So those are some of the grades that we produce up at Ticonderoga. And we have some really cool promotional pieces that Karin and her team have put together. So I'm going to pass it over to her so she can walk you through some of those pieces with you. So Karin, back to you.
Thanks, Jay. And Wayne, thank you for your insight. As Jay said, and as I said earlier, some of you guys received a sample kit in the mail, and I just want to go through a few of those pieces and talk about them. I'm sure you've noticed by now we're very proud of the Ticonderoga Mill, and we're always trying to find ways to tell that story to people who aren't able to visit the mill or aren't as familiar. So one of the pieces that is in your kit that we put together came out the end of last year, beginning of this year, is our Ticonderoga 3D mailer. We worked with structural graphics on this piece, and it shipped out as a flat, two-dimensional piece. And then when you open it up, which I'll try and do without knocking myself out, because it turns into a pretty big 3D piece. And each one of the quadrants of this piece tells a different story. So it will talk about the forest, it'll talk about the mill, and of course it'll talk about the paper. And within each quadrant, there's some text listed that talks about it and tells the story. But and we also, just for fun, added some fun little figurines that you can pop up and play with. One of my absolute favorites is Milton the Mill Muse, and you will see him a little later in the year in some additional collateral, so you'll want to remember Milton. But the best part about this particular piece is that within each quadrant, there's augmented reality. So if you go to the Apple Play or Google Play or Apple Store and you download the IP4D app, which is a free app, you can scan each segment and a little projector screen is going to pop up and play a video for you that kind of brings the mill to life. And it's kind of a behind the scenes look for you to see what we're so proud of about the mill. So like I said, that's a piece that we just produced at the very beginning of the year. We do have them available at our sample center, and I'll tell you how to get one a little later if you're interested and you did not receive one. Another piece that just came out in March of this year is our election season voter guide. Election season's big for the paper industry. I mean, you think ballots, you think of communications, just a lot of paper usage that goes out for an election season, and that's a normal election season. And clearly we can all agree this is not a normal anything, but a normal election season. So at the beginning of March, we put out a piece that we wanted to showcase all of our brands and how they could be used in applications around an election. But initially we started talking about it and we were talking about ballots, and obviously ballots are a really big part of it, but there's so much more. But to give you an order of magnitude of what elections can look like for paper, using 2016 as a benchmark, we think that we estimated about 80 million paper ballots were used. This year, with the impacts of COVID, they think that'll go up 60 to 90%. So that could be 150 million paper ballots. In addition to paper ballots that are actually used at a voting station, now we have all the absentee ballots of the people who are afraid to go to the polls. And then all the additional communication that's going to go out about how do you vote absentee? What will it look like? You know, what's changing? So this piece was very timely, whether we knew it or not. When you open it up, on the inside, we have our candidates, which are basically our Accent and Spring Hill brands that we use a lot in an election printing. And then we have a few samples within here. So the first one is a direct mail piece, and it's printed on Spring Hill 90-pound index. This meets the 7-point postal requirement thickness, so you can mail this piece. And they think of this as something that would come in your mail and remind you where your voting location is, or how you wanted to vote absentee. The next piece, we have a sample door hanger, and this is on Accent 100-pound text. And so maybe while you're on the Zoom meeting with us, somebody comes to talk to you about their candidate and you don't answer the door and they leave this here. So good sample there. The next piece is a flyer, and this is printed on Spring Hill, 60-pound opaque text. And this is maybe something that, people hand out to educate you about the candidates or about the initiatives when you go to a polling location. And the last one, which is where we started the whole thing, is a make up a ballot. We sell a lot of paper into the ballot industry, mostly 80-pound and 100-pound accent. This particular ballot is printed on 80-pound smooth. And the reason we chose that for this piece is that this grade comes in indigo and inkjet as a stocked item. And a lot of these ballots these days we are seeing printed digitally. So no matter how it's printed, we basically have a paper for that application. So that is the election season voter guide. And like I said, those came out in about March of this year, right before we all got sent home. So we're happy to share that with you as well. The newest piece we have that just got released post-COVID is the paper menu playbook. And I bet you can all guess where this came about. Restaurant industry has been really heavily impacted by COVID. They've had to make a lot of changes, and that goes from reduced seating to takeout only. The restaurants that have been able to open, their safety protocols, their cleaning, and one of the things kind of across the board they've been mandated to do is go to a single-use disposable menu. So again, we wanted to showcase our brands and how picking the right paper can really impact your brand identity. So if we start out with the outside folder, it's printed on accent 120-pound cover. It has a debossed logo here on it, and it kind of has a faux leather look to it. And when you open it up, we have 3 different menus. They all basically follow the same format of, a fake menu on the front and then your stocking information on the back. But to have a little bit of fun with them, since all these papers are made at the Ticonderoga Mill, we name them after iconic Thai things. So for example, the first one is the Thai Cafe. This is kind of your quick restaurant, quick serve restaurant. In this case, it is on Spring Hill Goldenrod and it's folded. It even has a little section here for your kids to do trivia while you're waiting for your pancakes. The next menu we named the Adirondack Grill. And this is kind of a mid-level restaurant. Think maybe Outback Steakhouse. It is printed on 70-pound Williamsburg. And the last one we had is supposed to be our high-end steakhouse, white tablecloths, long waiting list. And we named that Hamilton's after New York's Hamilton Lake. And this one we printed on warm white. It's a really great application to showcase the cream color of the sheet. And it's printed on 100-pound accent. So it's a heavier, thicker, more elegant type sheet. Also included in the kit is kind of an overview sheet that is printed on accent super smooth, and it just explains to you what's going on in the restaurant industry and why paper menus are the new wave of the future, and kind of the benefits of it to you as a consumer, that you're not touching a menu that someone else has, and for the restaurant it also enables them to change their menu regularly and quickly, kind of on the fly. So that is the paper menu piece. The one other piece of collateral that I wanted to talk to you about is our DYK binder. And our DYK series has been out. I think we started it probably in about 2016, but when we first started it, it was just a flat piece. And the sales team would take it out when they would go talk to customers. The marketing team would use it at big shows like HOW or Adobe Max. And our inspiration behind this was to educate and kind of bite-sized morsels. So we wanted to empower you with knowledge, but make it manageable and memorable. We quickly kind of realized that we started getting requests for, could you do a DYK on this? Or, have you thought about doing that? And so we decided, rather than having these just these single flat pieces, that we created a binder. And within the binder is the same sheet, but it's folded and punched. And if you request a binder and you get on the mailing list, then each month as a new edition comes out, our sample center will send you a new one. And they range from things about new presses, or maybe the best way to use a direct mail campaign. We've talked about responsible forest management. We've talked about trends in book publishing. So it's just anything that we think that a printer or a creative might find interesting. There's basically 2 main sections to the DYK. And that is the Did You Know section, which is kind of the really high level, hey, this is the topic and this is why we think you'd be interested in it. And then there's 4 or 5 tips. And these tips are meant to drill down and give you kind of a practical application for how do I apply this? What does this mean to me? And then lastly, we always try and add a section that if you would like some more information, hey, here's a deeper dive, here's some more resources for you. So those are the collateral pieces we had in there. The one other thing that I'm hoping you will enjoy is the Ticonderoga book. It's called The Land Between the Lakes. And it has a lot of pictures of the Ty Mill, the land, the woodlands, the paper. And it was just a gift from us to you for coming to our webinar today. And I did a really horrible job of advancing my slides while I did this. One of my panelists should have been nudging me along here. If you didn't get a kit and you are interested, you can go to axandopaque.com and all of these tools are available there, or you could email our IP Sample Center directly, or you can always reach out to Jay or myself, and we'll be happy to get those for you. That's all I have today. I don't know if any other questions came in.
There was one that we had, well, I'll kind of combine it because they're kind of the same. You might have touched upon this, Wayne, but I'm going to throw this one to you. It says, is there an energy and bio-neutral advantage to an integrated mill?
That's a good question. And that really, it can be from an energy standpoint. It really has to do with a lot of how much energy is expended on getting the raw material to the mill. Particularly in some of the mills that are non-integrated, they're reliant on being able to buy the appropriate pulp type to get to their mill. And the carbon footprint can sometimes be unfavorable because the transportation distances are so long between, you know, say, maybe a source pulp mill maybe in Canada, and then they need to bring that down somewhere into Virginia or something like that, or something New York. They're certainly going to expend a lot of energy and carbon in order to be able to get it from point A to point B. The advantage that we have certainly is that we buy all of our wood locally, and we're certain that we know the pedigree of the wood. We know that the source of the fiber comes from forests that are sustainably managed as well. So there is that longer term aspect in terms of, you know, you're going to have a continually regenerating forest that is going to continue to bring the benefits of the forest to the general public. You know, water quality, air quality, wildlife habitat, and frankly, just a nice quality of life.
Great, thank you, Wayne. You see our contact information up on the screen. So those are our email addresses. Feel free to reach out to us, as Karin said, if you have any questions. And
Jay, the name of the app for the AR experience in the Ty mailer is IP4D.
Yes, yes.
The number 4, the letter D.
So you go onto the Apple Store or Google Play, just type that in and you'll pull it up. It's free and it's great. Yeah, we have a number of actually of our pieces. Some of our swatch books even contain augmented reality as well. So it'll work on everything that we produce that has augmented reality.
Yeah, if you guys are good, we can still take questions for any time. I did have a few things to touch on for APC, and really can't thank you enough, Wayne and Karin and Jay, for the excellent webinar. Hopefully that was valuable for the almost 80 folks who were online for all of this. And again, the samples are just fantastic. I've got my my Ty 3D hat.
There you go.
But just a beautiful piece. And again, I just think it's so important that when people have so many choices for how they get a message out these days, that I love it when a piece really utilizes things that are unique to print, when you can use the texture, the dimensionality. You know, that experience is such a different experience than, you know, right now, even on this webinar, there's people watching on phones or big screen TVs or whatever. It's going to be a very different experience for everybody. And when you do put that down on print, you've got a lot of control, and yet it's also something that somebody can go back to multiple times and have a different experience each time they pick up that menu or that reference piece or so forth. So really great examples, and thanks so much for providing that out to the folks who registered for the webinar. So the other thing I wanted to remind folks of is this is a webinar. So every month we have a meetup as well. So part of what we're doing at our coming meetups, the last meetup we had a wine tasting that was quite interesting. The next meetup is going to be at the end of August on the 27th. So in the meetup, it will be the more typical Zoom format that you may be used to. We're then going to go into breakout rooms, and each of our mills that has presented by then will have their own branded breakout room. So there'll be a room for international paper. And if you have questions about accent or the woodlands or anything that came up today, you will have an opportunity, just like you would at a paper show, to hang out at that table and ask these experts those questions. So there'll be some other mills there that will have in their separate breakout rooms, and we'll continue that through the fall with our other meetups. So please be on the lookout for the next thing that we'll release next week. Will be the announcements for session 2. Sign up next week so that you'll have an opportunity to get your sample pack for that session. That session will be on a Wednesday night, August 12th. And you will need to be signed up at least a week in advance to have a good shot at getting some samples for that. And if you aren't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please search APC-NYC on YouTube. And you can see our other excellent webinars from earlier this year on different subjects that Siobhan, our president, and her team produced. And also, please like us on the typical things, like us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, and also reach out to International Paper and their social media and your other favorite mills, and we'll be partnering with those mills to advertise each of our upcoming sessions. Anything else? So thanks again to Linda Meyer Monroe, our title sponsor for this whole series, and thank you so much, our team at International Paper, the APC board, and our Print Innovations Committee. So,
thank you for hosting, Jim.
Thanks.
Thank you.
take care.
Take care, everybody.